Welcome everybody to 3 Count Commentaries. I am MagMongoSlade. Today we're going to talk about Titus O'Neil doing the two-step for Saudi Arabia. I don't understand this. Don't like it. Don't like this. Don't want to see this brother doing this, but he's doing it. Don't like it at all. All right. So Titus O'Neil went on TMZ to discuss criticisms of WrestleMania 43 being in Saudi Arabia. I want to read this whole thing because it needs to be ingested in full in order to get how ridiculous this guy is. He says, I can say this because I've been to Saudi Arabia several times now. I feel safer in Saudi Arabia than I do in most places or in a lot of places in the USA. I think in the US, we have the mindset that we're the greatest country in the world, and we are a great country. But people don't move to the United States because we're the greatest country in the world. They move because we have the greatest amount of opportunity. Pause right here. What else do you really need as a human being in the world? You do need a lot of opportunities. That and what the founding of this country is really about is what makes this country great. So he says, I think the biggest difference between places like overseas in Japan, Saudi Arabia, the Middle East, and the U.S. are morals and convictions. They actually live by theirs, whether you like them or not. They're going to pray 5 times a day. They're going to stop during the day, and they're going to do their thing no matter what. And who likes it, who don't like it. Now, I can agree with this, but it's a religious country. We are a secular country. People are allowed to live by their morals and convictions, but those morals and convictions have to be individual. They cannot be group-based. Unlike in, Saudi Arabia, where they have a state religion. The United States has a separation of church and state. We would have, largely, people living by their convictions and morals if we could impose convictions and morals upon other people, which we cannot. Legally, we cannot. Because we cannot set up a caliphate. Or, we don't have a Saudi king or anything like that. So, while I understand what he's trying to say here, you can't do that. Now, I know Japan is not, a religious country, but it's a ethnically homogenous country. We're not even that. We're not ethnically homogenous, and we're not a religious state. So it's a secular country with individual morals and convictions, etc. And people choose not to live by those things that they espouse. But I'm pretty sure that if you actually spent a whole lot of time in Saudi Arabia, you'll probably find the Saudi princes and a bunch of other people not exactly following Islam to the T. I can pretty much guarantee you of that. But then here's where he lost me. He says, you don't hear about mass shootings in Saudi Arabia. You don't hear about mass shootings in China. You don't hear about mass shootings in Japan. I think if people went over to Saudi Arabia or had the chance to go there, their views would change dramatically. And I'm not saying they'd get it all right, but we don't get it all right either to be pointing fingers at anybody. I agree with that last sentence. I think the United States still has much to work on. So we shouldn't be pointing fingers. And I think a lot of the really progressive wrestling fans that hate Saudi Arabia, I think that's where they err when they discuss Saudi Arabia. They say, well, they kill journalists and they kill people for being gay and all that kind of stuff. I say, yeah, we do pretty screwed up things here too. Maybe not to that degree. Everybody's going to be screwed up in a different way. That's what they say about, crazy people. Everybody's crazy in their own unique way. So, yeah, there's no mass shootings in Saudi Arabia. There's no mass shootings in China. There are mass suicides, though. I mean, I'm talking real mass suicide. People will kill themselves in Japan just because they are too scared to quit their job. They're stressed out. There's a suicide forest in Japan, for God's sake. In Saudi Arabia, well, they behead people. We can't even do that. We can't get away with a beheading here in the United States. Not even in Utah. Not even in Delaware. Nowhere. We can't behead people in the United States anymore. They can behead people in Saudi Arabia, though. Chop their head right on off. They also have blasphemy laws in Saudi Arabia. Also, while our restrictions were pretty bad in the United States, there was no videos of the government bolting people into their house like there was in China. So we're all different. We're all different. Okay, so he continues. So for us to be able to go to Saudi Arabia, when I went the first time that we ever went, and people had all these negative things to say, and there was a whole set of scare tactics and scare verbiage and all these things. In my hotel room, it's 1 a.m, and I see kids running around on the beach. Kids! So I get up the next morning, I ask my driver, hey, you guys aren't worried about these kids getting sexually assaulted or beaten or brutalized or kidnapped or whatever? He said no, because it's an automatic death sentence. And I'm like, so kids are safe over there, but kids are not safe in the U.S. That's not entirely true. You got like every kid outside is going to get sexually assaulted. That's not true. Now, just because there's a death sentence behind it doesn't mean people don't do it. All right. We know that in Iran, which I know is different, Sunni and Shia Muslims, I know it's different. I believe Iran is Shia, Saudi Arabia is Sunni. They different levels of extremes. Saudi Arabia tends to be a little bit more moderate, while Iran is basically Muslim Cuba. But they put people to death for all sorts of things in Saudi Arabia. All right? They will put people to death for all sorts of things. And I guarantee you, the rate of children being sexually assaulted is not zero. All right? Because we've seen other Muslim countries where young boys are not safe. Google Bakhjabazi if you want to learn. And please don't want to learn. Do not be curious, because I found out about that because I was curious. But I would not. Muslims and children, I don't know, man. Did you read that Quran? I don't know. Next, he says, so my perspective of us going to Saudi Arabia for WWE, yeah, it's business, but it's also exchanging cultures. When we went over there, women are just now getting introduced to being able to drive. Things are changing over there. And so many people have this mindset in America, like if somebody talks about race, well, that was so long ago. It actually wasn't. It's 2025 now. It's 1960s, 70s, 80s, sometimes even up to the present, that we still have systemic issues with racism. I'm sorry, what does this have to do with Saudi Arabia? And this is where his criticisms of the United States comes from. It's the liberal obsession with race. That because, well, there was racism in the 60s, and, there was racism. There's always going to be racism whenever there's multiple different races of people. Saudi Arabia, it's mostly an Arab country. It's not like a whole different group of people there. And there's obviously going to be some multiculturalism in Saudi Arabia, but it's Muslim. And that unique religious ideology pretty much flattens everything, So being a fellow Muslim pretty much flattens the racial thing. But below that, there's still race issues with black people and Arabs. I know, because I know black people and Arabs in the United States. There's still race issues, even when they're both Muslim. So don't give me this whole racism is the original sin of the United States. Therefore, every country is somewhat better because they have less crime. And the reason why they have less crime is because usually their governments are more repressive. There's no defund the police types in Japan or in Saudi Arabia. They don't play that. But we, in our liberal democracy over here, or liberal republic over here, there's a bunch of idiots running around talking about defund the police. And in Saudi Arabia, they're talking about killing people for crimes. If Donald Trump went on TV right now and said that we were going to give death penalties to people who molest children, and death penalties to people who rape, and death penalties to so-and-so, they say he was Hitler. I guarantee it. And all these people would probably be people Titus O'Neil would vote for. They'd be like, oh no, there's Orange Hitler. He's going to kill people just for being accused of rape. Yeah, but in Saudi Arabia, they might do it. And he's like, yeah, we're safer over here. Nonsense. Let's continue. He says, I'd rather go as a performer where I'm going to be celebrated, not tolerated. And it's going to be a first-class experience for everybody that chooses to come to the show, where I'm going to be celebrated, not tolerated. This guy doesn't know much about anything, I swear to God. All right? This man professes to be a Christian, is very loud and proud about his love of Jesus. Muslims do not believe in that. If you went over to Saudi Arabia and started professing your Christianity, you will very quickly go from being celebrated to tolerated, and then maybe not tolerated, depending on the day, depending on how, these particular Muslims decide to take it. They may not tolerate that at all. Titus O'Neil should read the Quran. He really should. If you're going to go out in public and put over Saudi Arabia and put it over like it's better than the United States, read the Quran. This is the convictions and morals that they are celebrating, which are in very much opposition to your personal morals and convictions, sir. They will kill you. No doubt about it. Christians are barely tolerated anywhere in the Muslim world. Anywhere. Let's talk about this because I just looked this up and this really is burning me. It's burning me alive. So I went to Open Door US to look at Christianity in Saudi Arabia. Okay. There are 2,274,000 Christians in Saudi Arabia, thereabouts. So here's what they said. Not only is it illegal to leave the Islamic faith, new believers will face intense opposition from their families and communities. In a shame-honor culture, bringing shame on the family is in this way is considered the worst thing a person can do. And they can be pressured, disowned, locked away, beaten, or even killed to restore the family's honor. Because of this, most Saudi Christians tend to follow their faith quietly and secretly. This extends as far as not even telling their own spouse or children about their faith for fear that extended family members or school staff could discover that they have left Islam. But he says, there are no legal churches or buildings or meetings. There are no churches in Saudi Arabia. You're not allowed to build a church. You're not even allowed to tell your children. How are you going to profess your love for Jesus Christ in a Muslim country? And he says, this is a man who talks about how important his faith is. I want to go somewhere where I'm going to be celebrated and not tolerated. Nonsense. That's racism talking. You putting your black skin first. No. You don't do that. You put your faith first. God should come first. And the God that you claim you serve is not welcome in Saudi Arabia. Not welcome. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it. In 2012, they arrested 35 Christians, 35 Ethiopian Christians. So Ethiopians, they ain't white. Titus O'Neil. They arrested 35 Ethiopian Christians for praying in public. Give me a fucking break, you dork. You don't know nothing. You've been to the country, you don't know a goddamn thing. Next, he says, this is Titus O'Neil continuing. WWE is a platform that caters to one audience. That's the audience of one. No matter what color you are, no matter what religious you practice, you don't practice, no matter where you come from. We have too many people on our roster from various places around this globe to be prejudiced, to be anti-Semitic, to be any of these things. So if there's ever a platform for us as a company to take and utilize and show what unity can look like, to show what good business looks like, to show what other countries look like, other cultures look like, and how they embrace what we do, no matter where they are, no matter where they come from and how they dress, Saudi Arabia is definitely one of those places, in my opinion. And I think if WWE Brass and TKO Brass didn't feel that way, the decision to bring WrestleMania to Saudi Arabia would not have been made. First and foremost, most of the people that are complaining about the show being over there would never book a ticket to go over there anyway. Watch the show on TV. It's going to be a spectacle. Saudi Arabia does nothing small, and WWE does nothing small. So get ready for a hell of a show and a hell of an experience. And on a global stage, that's going to show everyone why this business, and particularly TKO and WWE, do it better than anyone in the world. Okay, sure. Look, I am one of those people that I typically defend the Saudi shows. I think I look at it as just business. You know, people follow the show. The show is popular in Saudi Arabia. The government's willing to pay for it. Go do the shows. I'm not mad at you. Go do the shows. I don't have a problem. My problem is when Titus O'Neil tries to compare safety in Saudi Arabia to safety in the United States when he doesn't live in Saudi Arabia. He doesn't know the history of that country. He only knows what he saw. And what he saw was he was there as a tourist. That's it. He doesn't live in the country. He's there as a tourist. So of course he was, and then he came as an honored guest at that. So he absolutely got treated very, very well. And then also when you add that the Saudis are trying to clean up their public image, they treated them very, very well. Extremely well. But it's all a mirage. That's all it is. I don't like the digs at the good old U.S. I'm not a fan of that. I mean, we have our problems. The U.S. is not perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. But let me tell you this. They have their own problems. And their problems are different from ours. If you want to say school shootings are a problem, okay, fair enough. They don't have the school shootings problem. You want to say racism a problem? Okay, fair enough. They don't have the racism problem. But they got other problems. They got the persecution of non-Muslims problem. And at one point in time, from just a cursory glance, almost 60% of women have been domestically abused in Saudi Arabia. Domestic violence is a huge issue in Saudi Arabia. Huge issue. Huge. They have their own problems, brother. That's all I'm saying. Don't come here to the United States and put us down to lift up somewhere else. They have their own problems. That's the best way to handle this situation. The best way to have this conversation. There's people who don't like that they're going to do the show in Saudi Arabia. Okay, we can note the problems with doing the show in Saudi Arabia. But we can say, look, Saudi has problems that are a different kind. The U.S. is going to have its own problems. Australia is going to have their own problems. France is going to have their own problems. Every country is going to have their own problems. But you're not there to solve everybody's problems. You're not there to highlight the negatives. You're there to highlight the positives. You're there to bring a positive show to the people there. So when he finished strong about, the talent, bringing the cultures together and all that, I like that idea. But don't come here talking about how the children aren't safe in the United States and all that. Get that shit out of here. All of this racism is so, get out of here. Kick rocks. I don't want to hear that. Because you don't see the other side of Saudi Arabia. You basically went on a resort to Saudi Arabia. You spent a couple of nights there as an honored guest. And you're like, I've been there. I know what's going on. Yeah, sure. Whatever. Thank you guys for your time. I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.